Sure. Hello students, welcome to today's lecture on computer applications in business. For today we are going to study the topic heuristics of computers. I'm your professor Siddharth Ingle, and this is probably our first lecture in this subject. So heuristics basically means something which is not in detail but gives you a working understanding of. So that is exactly what I'm trying to do in this lecture. I'll try to give you an understanding about what computers are, how they work, historical view of how computers have evolved over time, and we are also going to look at their block diagram. So let's begin. So let's start with generations of computer. So in the first generation we have what we call the vacuum tube based period, which is from about 1946 to 1959. This is the time where Charles Babbage came up with the notion of using integrated tube systems to implement logic. So therefore, Charles Babbage is generally considered as the father of computers. But then it was not really used commercially because the computers were huge in size and there were a whole lot of problems with them. The second generation of computers is from 1959 to 1965. These are the transistor-based computers, or in the beginning, as they were called as Turing machines, because of the contribution of Alan Turing to this era. Then we have third generation computers, which this generation spans from 1965 to 1971. They were based on integrated circuit. So integrated circuit is basically a bunch of transistors put together. And fourth generation is what we call as the VLSI microprocessor based. VLSI means very large scale integration. So very large scale integration. That's what VLSI stands for. And then in the fifth generation that we see today is what we call ultra large scale microprocessor based generation. So that's a overview of generation of computers. Now let's look at what the features were of these computers. Vacuum tube technology, as we have said, for the first generation, they were quite unreliable. They supported machine languages only. So machine languages are these languages which are basically codes in the form of ones and zeros, like your Morse code. So they only supported machine languages. They were very costly, generated a lot of heat, slow input and output devices, huge sizes. They required AC all the time because they used to heat up so much. It was economically really difficult for people to develop these computers, as they were totally non-profitable, as in the value that was gained from developing the computer was less than the value invested into making them. So which is why this period was a kind of latent. That means the development didn't really picked up speed because of economic reasons, and they consumed a lot of electricity as well. Some examples are ENIAC to IBM 650. Then we have our second generation computers. They use transistors for the first time. So transistors are sort of switching devices or amplifying devices that are used to switch electrical signals. I mean, this is not an engineering class, so I won't probably go in detail as to what transistors are made up of. They are made of semiconductors basically, but yeah, they are used to have a sort of to generate a sort of code, like 1 or 0, or plus 5 volt or 0 volt in this case, and the computers work based on this code. As to how this computer work based on this code, we'll see in the later part of this lecture. Second feature was they are reliable in comparison to first generation computers. They were smaller in size as compared to first generation computers. They generated less heat. They consumed less electricity. They were faster than first generation computers, but they were still pretty costly, and they still required AC because all the time, because they used to heat up so much. And they supported machine language and assembly language. Now, what machine language and assembly language is, uh, I will tell you more in detail. I have to explain you working of computer before I come to this topic. So first let me explain the working, and then we'll get back to this. Examples include IBM 1620, IBM 7049, so on and so forth. Okay, now we move on to third generation computers. They used ICs for the first time. They were more reliable in comparison to previous computers. They were quite smaller in sizes. They generated less heat. They were faster. They required lesser maintenance. They were a bit costly. They consumed less electricity. They supported high level language. So again, what does high level language mean? I will explain it to you in the later sections of this video. So examples were IBM 360 series to TDC 316 series. So these were kind of precursors to what to the era of Steve Jobs and to the era of Microsoft, that is Bill Gates. Okay, so the fourth generation computers. So these are VLSI technology computers. They were quite cheap, especially because of efforts of guys like Steve Jobs. That is the work that Apple put in. Apple really put down the cost of computers by a huge margin. They were portable and reliable. They can use this for personal computing. They were very small size. They used pipeline processing. AC was not necessarily required, as Apple found out a way to engineer the design as to that it would not heat so much. So AC was not necessarily required. Although I remember using these computers, and I would say that AC was recommended, but it was not necessarily required. It used to heat up quite a lot. I have personally used these computers. So a concept of internet was introduced, and great development in the fields of networks. Computer became easily available. So this is where you have your Cray-1, your Star 1000. Cray-1 was the first supercomputer, by the way. So that's the era of fourth generation. Now fifth generation is what we have as of today. We still use fifth generation computing, but I mean, a lot of changes have happened in this as well. Now we have distributed networks, we have cloud computing, so on and so forth. But yeah, fifth generation is the kind of system that you use usually. So that used ULSI technology. ULSI means ultra large scale integrated ultra large scale ICs. Technology, development of true artificial intelligence. We'll learn about what artificial intelligence is in the upcoming lectures. I mean, these are a bit of complex topics, and I have to, and I mean they require a lecture of their own, I think, because if I have to cover so much, I won't be able to cover everything in one lecture. Development of natural language processing. I'll also explain what natural language processing is in upcoming lectures. Advancement in parallel processing, advancement in superconductor technology, more user-friendly interfaces with multimedia features, availability of very powerful and compact computers at cheaper rates. So your examples are desktop, laptops, notebooks, ultrabook, Chromebooks, so on and so forth. Okay, so here's the block diagram of what a computer is. You know that computer is, well, what we call a computer system is a combination of a lot of things. I mean, you have your monitor where you see the computer shows you something. You have your keyboard where you put in something. So yeah, but there is something in between this, there's something in the middle, the the thinking part, if you would like to think that computers are able to think. So yeah, that's the middle part is what we are going to talk about, yeah, in this lecture, because that's quite interesting as to what happens between what input is given to the computer and what output comes out of it, what happens in between. So yeah, let's look at that in detail. Okay, so how does a computer work? Working of a computer. Let's read the text here, and then I'll go in detail and explain what really happens. Okay, so control unit. The control unit of the CPU contains circuitry that uses electrical signals to direct the entire computer system to carry out or execute stored program instructions like an orchestra leader. The control unit does not execute program instructions, rather it directs other parts of the system to do so. The control unit must communicate with both the arithmetic and logic unit and memory. Arithmetic and logic unit. The arithmetic logic unit can perform various kinds of arithmetic operations on mathematical calculations, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, as its name implies. The arithmetic logic unit also performs logical operation. A logical operation usually is comparison. The unit can compare numbers, letters, or special characters. And then we have a memory unit. This unit can store instructions, data, and intermediate results. This unit supplies information to other units of the computer when needed. It is also known as internal storage unit, or the main memory, or the primary storage, or random access memory. Its size affects speed, power, and capability of the system. Primary memory and secondary memory are two types of memories in the computer. What are the differences between them? I'll explain it to you as we move on in the course. So okay, so let me try to give you an intuitive idea of what a computer is or how a computer works. To do that, I am going to use an analogy here. By the way, one of the miseries of life is that we tend to name things badly. So computers don't necessarily compute in that sense. In the industry, in the actual IT industry, they call computers as data handlers, which is, I think, a better name for it, because in principle that is what they are. So let's look at an analogy. Let's think that there is a file clerk and he is a data handler, and this file clerk is responsible for for putting in numbers and doing calculations of let's say a bank. So what does this file clerk do basically? This whenever you tell so let's say the file clerk has to count the commission of 1 year of one salesman of a bank. So his boss tells him that okay, this is the commission rate, and this is like, you have to multiply this commission rate with all the sales that he has done in past year, and then tell me what is the total commission that I have to pay to him. So what does this file clerk do? He goes into his locker room, where he has all this locker filing cabinet, and he pulls out this filing cabinet, and then he picks out the appropriate file which belongs to that salesman. And then he takes another card from the file. He writes down all the sales that this file clerk has done in the last 1 year, and then he multiplies each and every cell with the commission rate, and then he does summation of all the answers that he has received from doing the multiplication, and thus he'll get the total total value that the boss has to pay to the salesman. So let's say this is the operation that the file clerk has to do. So as you can see, we need a particularly smart fellow, like with substantial degree of intelligence to do this operation. So a file clerk has to be substantially smart, in order to understand what multiplication has to be done, what card needs to be taken out, so on and so forth, and following all these instructions. um, so that's the thing. But what if you can get a file clerk which is 5 times faster than this one? That's a very tempting offer. So you will be thinking, okay, fine, we'll hire him. But the only problem is this new file clerk is, well, let's say he cannot do multiplication. Then what's the use of hiring this file clerk? If you cannot even do multiplication, then I mean, it doesn't make sense. How will you perform any action? Well, we can send him to school, we can teach him how to do multiplication, but that's a long process. So a better idea, we will have a chart where all the multiplication table is written. So he can just look at the number, so he can just look at 8 and he can look at 7, and he'll cross compare, and he'll pick out the result. So this way, all this multiplication that we took so much effort to learn while we were in school, now it's all put in a filing system itself. So you don't have, the file clerk doesn't have to memorize anything. So this way what we have done is, uh, because we are getting the advantage of speed, we took this dumb file clerk, and we for him we dumbed down the process so that he can do it. And we did that because we were in benefit from the speed, because he was 5 times faster. Now let's say we got another guy and he is 10 times faster, but this guy cannot do addition. So what do we do? Well, we have another table, another filing system where additions are given. So now he has to look every time in this table to see what is the addition of two numbers, and then he will copy that number as it is. You see, he's damn fast at picking out the card, going to the filing cabinet, picking out the appropriate file, writing down the writing down the values. He does that really fast. He's damn fast in that. So he's faster but dumber. So that's the principle: faster and dumber. So we put a filing cabinet, we put a system in place for this faster and dumber clerk to perform multiplication and addition. What if we got a guy who is 100 times faster, but he cannot do anything? He can only distinguish between two symbols, any symbol, plus or minus, 0 or 1, so on and so forth. Yeah, any two symbols. Then you can imagine that we have to make a very dumbed down filing cabinet. The number of files would increase. We have to make the instructions in the format of only these two symbols, plus or minus, or ones or zero. But we would still be able to make this dumber and faster file clerk to do all the operations that we want, and we would still want him to work for us because he is 100 times faster than the first guy. So that's really the principle. And if I think you have already started to see that we can kind of do this thing electronically as well, or mechanically as well. We don't have to have human intelligence to do it. We can make a machine which can distinguish between 1 or 0, and that's really what a computer is. So these are transistors which have code, which only reads two symbols, that is 1 or 0, or that is plus 5 volt or 0 volt, and it carries out instructions based on the code that we have pre-specified in the system. So we have specified what the value of 0010 would mean, and the system only checks whether the value is correctly that 0010, and it fetches that value for us. And this is the principle of working of the computer. The entire system works based on this principle. It does all sorts of addition, multiplication, division, subtraction based on this very same principle, that which is dumber and faster. And we achieve this through through mechanical or electronic uh, devices like flip flops and transistors. uh, yeah, so this is how a computer really works. Okay, now let's look at um, hardware and software. So the hardwares are basically the physical components of a computer, which is your mouse, your keyboard, your IP devices, your even your motherboard inside your CPU. So these are all hardware, and software is all the software that run on the system, like your Microsoft Office, Excel, Outlook, Word, PowerPoint, etc. And finally, to in the end of this lecture, I'm going to talk about the differences between software and hardware. It is collection of programs to bring computer hardware system into operation. That's what software is. And hardware is, it includes physical components of computer system. It includes numbers, alphabet, alphanumeric symbols, identifiers, keywords, etc. It consists of electronic components like ICs, diodes, registers, crystal boards, insulators, etc. Software products evolve by adding new features to existing programs to support hardware. While hardware design is based on architectural decisions to make it work over a range of environmental conditions and time. It will vary as per computer and is built in functions and programming languages. And while hardware is mostly constructed for all types of computer systems. Software is designed and developed by experienced programmers in high level language, while hardware can understand only low level language or machine language. So this is where the part where I told you I will explain what high level language and low level language are. So low level language is also alternatively called as assembly level language. So you see, like I explained to you, that computers only understand instructions in the form of plus 5 volt or 0 volt, which are represented as ones and zeros. So computers only understand ones and zeros. But for us to write software applications in just ones and zeros, it would be a really hectic task. So the engineering community have come up with a way to make our life easier. So which is why they have developed different layers on top of each other. So a high level language is pretty much like your Java or Python, which is much more readable, much more user friendly, much more human friendly for us to write. This code is then converted into assembly level language, which is a bit difficult, but it's still not ones and zeros. It's a bit difficult. This is how you program the microprocessor. So you write the code in high level language, then you compile it, then it gets compiled into assembly level language, and then it gets further compiled into ones and zeros, the language which computer understands. So that's the principle of high level language, low level language, and machine language. So this lecture was about the basics of computing and the basics of a computer device. I hope you understood something of value from this lecture, and I encourage you to go and read and research more about it and form your own understanding. And I hope to see you again soon in the next lecture. Thank you for joining with me today. Have a nice day.